So not long ago I uploaded a recording of an ambient generative patch I've built that runs according to the waves of the Baltic Sea. I will put a link in the description, of course. So today I wanted to give it another try and show you a few of the ideas I used in this patch. Of course, this can work with other sources, with other field recordings, or even with instruments that you play. But in this case I will use the waves of the Baltic Sea, and this is how the result will sound like. Okay, so this video might be a bit more advanced and complex, but I hope you will still find it useful. All I have here is the mind-meld mixer. I have here send reverb with plateau and the cable color key with the cable color key from Inkland. So I will color code my cables, maybe it will be easier to follow along. And I already have here the Seco player with the sample loaded of the waves. This is how the recording will sound like. Right, but at first we will not use it as a sound source. It will mostly have control over the patch. So let's really start. We will start first with an envelope follower. It will be this one here from Bog Audio. Right, this module will convert the amplitude of the sample, the actual volume, into voltage that then we can use. Right, so I will connect the output. This will be a green cable for modulation, the output from the sampler. We can also look at this on the scope, right? And you can see that basically we get voltage that goes up and down. Again, this will happen according to the waves or the volume of the waves. Again, going up and down, you can see this looks really like waves, right? And this we will use as the base of this patch. So first of all, what we can do is use this to control the amplitude of a voice. So I will use the VCO. We will start with the VCA, so I will send this through a VCA to the mixer, right? I will use a triangle wave. VCA is a great way or a great module to control amplitude of signals, right? And then I can use this signal to control the VCA, to control the amplitude of this triangle wave. Right, in this case, I will also take the recording or the sample a bit down in pitch, which will also change the playback speed. Again, we don't really care about how it sounds like for now. So I want it to play a bit slower. Right, and you can see it will control the VCA, it will bring the triangle in and out. Right, and now instead of the VCA, another thing we can do is use a wave folder, for example. So have the waves control the timbre of this voice together with the amplitude. So I will use the wave shaper from Surge. Right, I will send this to a wave folder, let's say a soft single fold. Right, and again, in this case, with this folder, I can get rid of the VCA because it will not let any signal through when it's closed. And we also have here gain control, right? So I will just make the connections instead of the VCA. I will use the wave shaper, right? And I can map this modulation. If I zoom in a bit, I can map this modulation once to the drive, right? And then take also the gain down and map this also to the gain. Right, so now it controls the amplitude and the timbre. The stronger or louder the waves, the louder and the timbre changes of the VCO. Right, let's already send this through a delay. I will use Prince of Perception. Right, send the signal from the wave folder to the delay, take the mix a bit up, maybe a bit more feedback, change the delay time, let's say about 338 milliseconds. And of course, let's add also a healthy amount of reverb to this. Once again, I have here plateau as a send reverb. So I can just add this here through the mixer. Right, so again, the waves control now the amplitude and the timbre of this triangle wave, and this is nice, but let's add also pitch variation. There are a few ways we can do this. For now, what I will do is I will add a slope detector. Right, this module will detect the movement of a signal and will output gates accordingly. So if, for example, let's send this wave or this voltage from the envelope follower to the input of the slope detector, right, and I will have a look, or we will have a look at the rising output here on the scope. Right now, as long as the signal is rising as the volume goes up, right, when it goes up in voltage, we get a gate. All we have to do is change here the response, so it's less jittery and we get one long gate. Right, something like this. You can see the voltage goes up, the gate opens, it goes down, the gate closes. Right, so this is the first step. We get a gate whenever the volume, the amplitude goes up, but we still need something to give us note or changes in notes, and for this we will keep it simple for now. We will use a sample and hold. This will be the super sample and hold from count modula. Right, the gates from the slope detector, the rising output, will trigger the sample and hold, and the sample and hold will then generate random pitch information, but I would like to keep it in a certain scale, so I will use a quantizer. Right, this one here, it already has a few notes selected. Right, so the sample and hold will go to the quantizer. This will be yellow because pitch information is yellow in my case. Let's put this here. Right, and then it will go to the volt per octave input of the VCO. Now the range is really high. Right, it's the level here is at 100%, so the notes will go up and down, as you can hear. Let's take this down a bit, just to control the range. Right, and we still get the jitters here from the gates. So I will also change the response a bit more, take it also up. Right, this is also, by the way, very nice. This is also, by the way, why I'm using here the super sample and hold. It has a built-in level control. Right, so now the sample and hold, the range of the sample and hold is a bit not as wide. Right, it's a bit more narrow, so the notes will not jump up and down and everywhere. Right, so now the waves control the amplitude, the timbre, and we get also changes in pitch, which is already quite nice. Let's add another layer to this with Nimbus from Surge. This is a Clouds clone, a Mutable Instruments Clouds clone. I will use a copy, right, let's go after the delay, a copy of this voice, right, this will go to another channel here on the mixer. Again, since I'm using a copy of the voice, I'm going to turn the mix all the way up, because we already have the dry signal. Now nothing will happen, I still have it in a granulizer mode, but nothing will happen as long as the density is at 0. So if I take the density up, right, we should start getting grains generated. Maybe take the quality here down. Right, I can change, right, the grain size, texture all the way up so it's nice and smeared in the stereo field. Also spread, so it's spread in the stereo field. More reverb, of course. Maybe we can also take the pitch an octave up. If I right click it and I enter 12, this will be 12 semitones up, which is 1 octave. Right, and now I will add, or we will add, if you are building this with me, the quad LFO from Surge. I already have all of them set to random. Basically, they will output smooth random signals, right, which is always nice in a generative patch. So one will control the position of the grains, another one will control the size of the grains, right, something like this. Right, so again, there is more variation. Right, and let's add another voice to this. In this case, we will use the waves themselves as pitch information. So what we need a few things here. First of all, we need a voice. I will use the classic VCO, also from Surge. Also the Surge filter, which is always nice. We will use also an LFO, this will be the VCV LFO. And again, we want to use this for pitch information, so I will use another sample and hold, which is here, and because I want this to stay in the same scale, I will use also a quantizer, and this is what we will do. The LFO, the square output of the LFO, will trigger the sample and hold, so we tell the sample and hold when to sample, and what to sample. This will be again the signal from the envelope follower, which is basically the waves, right? This will go to the input. Again, I will take the level down a bit, just so we are not going everywhere in pitch. Right? So this is what it will sample. It will sample the waves together with the LFO, right? So let's start with this. This will go to the quantizer. Again, I want to stay in a certain scale. This will go to the volt per octave of the classic VCO. And now I can make this connection with a new connection feature of Surge. If I right-click the output, I can choose to connect this to the filter. If I right-click the filter outputs, I can choose to connect this to the mixer. Right, so already we have something going on. Now the same signal from the envelope follower, the same waves, I want them also to control the rate of the LFO, right? To change the frequency of the LFO. So I will connect this to the FM input, to the frequency modulation. And now I want that when the waves get louder, the LFO will play slower. So what I have to do is I have to turn this to the left, right? So the frequency control will move to the left the more amplitude or volume the waves have. Right, I will add also, of course, reverb here. Right, I can add unison, add some sub, add another quad LFO, or you know what, we have here still a few outputs here from the first quad LFO, so I can use this to modulate the shape, and another one to modulate the filter. Right, maybe a bit more resonance. Right, so again, we have movement in pitch again, but the pitch information comes basically from the waves. Right, now since the waves go up and down, just like the voltage goes up and down, the pitch changes might get a bit repetitive after a while. So what we can do is mix it with other signals. Right, so mix the waves with other signals. So for example, I will use the CV mix module, which is here from VCV. Right, the first signal, let's make this also yellow because it's pitch information. The first signal will be the same signal. Take the attenuator all the way up. So now we have the same result. Right, but now I can mix in a bit of the LFO, for example. Right, so it will also have effect over the pitch information. And also maybe another random voltage here from the quad LFO. Again, mix it a bit. So now the waves will go up and down, but they will be offset up and down as well with the LFO and with the random voltage. Right, I will send a copy of this to another delay. This can be in mono, it doesn't really matter. We will modulate also the panning here in a second. Right, this will go to the mixer. Mix all the way up. Again, we have already the original signal. So here we can have the mix all the way up. Take the lows out a bit with the internal filter here. Maybe a bit more feedback, change the delay time. Right, and now I can use the same LFO, maybe a triangle wave, to modulate the panning of this voice, of the delay just. Right, so again we have movement according to the waves of the Baltic Sea. I will spend a minute to name the channels just so we know what is what. We have here VCO, we have here Nimbus, we have here sort of a sequence, and we have a delay. Maybe here for the wave shaper, the gain we can take a bit down, so it's not too loud. And now let's use the magic of the shift register to generate some chords for us, right? So I will use the shift register from ML. Right, a shift register is basically like a sample and hold. It will sample a signal whenever it receives a trigger, but it will also shift the signal down through its outputs and will generate multiple signals that we can use for chords. Right, so the input will come from the quantizer we have here. Right, we have here a sequence going on. This will be the signal the shift register will sample. Right, and for the trigger source, we can use the falling output in this case from the slope detector, right? So whenever the waves become softer, the notes of the chords will also change. So this will go to the trigger input of the shift register, right? And now we should get multiple outputs, multiple variations of this sequence. Right, and we can use multiple of them to form a chord, and of course we will use the power of polyphony in this case. So I will use the merge module from VCV so we can merge them into a polyphonic chord. I will use, let's say, 3 outputs. So we have 3 note chords. Right, and now we get here a polyphonic cable with 3 notes. As our voice, we will use the FM2 VCO also from Surge. Use the output, the polyphonic output, as pitch information. Right, and let's see what we got. I will send this in mono, because we don't need stereo in this case, to the mixer. Right, let's go back here. I will name this chord, of course, add some reverb to this. And now I can also spread this a bit in the stereo field with the poly spread feature of the mixer. If I right-click this channel, we have here poly input behavior. If I sum this to stereo, just for a second I will solo it. Now it's spread also in the stereo field. Right, left and right. Very nice. So now we will add some movement here with another quad LFO. Right, so let's modulate, for example, the feedback. Again, I just connect it and now I can map it to the feedback, let's say. Here we have the FM amount. Right, so I can map another one to the FM amount. Here we have another FM amount, but I can change the ratio. So if I take this to 2, it will sound a bit different. Right, and again, add modulation here. Right, and now instead of having it drawn, I will send it through the Surge envelope generator VCA again. Right, I will send keep this in mono. Right, and I will use the same falling gate to open this VCA, sustain all the way up. Right, a bit more attack, maybe like 1.5 seconds of attack, and maybe a longer release, let's say about 3 seconds of release. Right, so now it's not just droning. Right, it will come in and out. Right, and now again, since we have a polyphonic signal, we can add a bass with a bass module from Sively, right, which will look like this. The bass itself, the voice itself will be another classic VCO. And again, the Surge filter. Once again, if I right-click the outputs, I can make the connections automatically to the filter and also to the mix master. Use the polyphonic pitch, right, the same polyphonic pitch from the shift register and merge module. Right, and then this will go to the bass. and this will make sure the bass module will just take or select the bass note from this chord and can take the octave down. Oh yes, a bit more sub. Unison. Listen to this. Right, by the way, here we have a polyphonic voice. The FM2 now is a polyphonic voice, so we can have also polyphonic modulation. If I right-click the quad LFO, I can change the number of polyphony. If I change this to 3, right now we have 3 different signals coming from each output, modulating each voice separately. So now we have even more movement. And also here we will add movement with even another quad LFO. Right, one will modulate the shape, another one will modulate the width. We have another width here that we can modulate, and another one will modulate the filter. A bit more resonance, a bit more drive, a bit less gain. Oh yes, this is really nice. Right, also here I will send a copy to a delay. In this case I will use the surge delay. Right, again, if I right click this, I go to this row to delay input and then to another channel on the mixer. Also here mix all the way up, take the lows down a bit or out. Right, a bit more modulation, a bit less rate or a bit slower, more feedback, more reverb. Let me just name this quickly. This will be bass. This will be bass delay. Healthy amount of reverb. Listen to this, how nice it is. All coming from the waves of the Baltic Sea. Right, another thing we can do is we can arpeggiate these notes of the chord. Right? So for this we will use a switch. I will use the switch from VCV, the 4 to 1. Right, use 4 notes from the shift register. Again, the shift register will generate notes coming from the quantizer, but will shift them so we get chords actually. Right, and now the switch will switch between these notes. As our voice, of course, we will use the FM operator. No generative patch is complete without at least one FM operator. The pitch information will go to the FM operator. Right, I will use also another LFO, another VCV LFO. This will act as our clock. So once it will go to the trigger of the switch, but also it will gate the FM operator. And let's send this to the mixer. Add a bit feedback. Right, soon the notes here will change. Right, you can hear. Right, and this will sort of arpeggiate the notes. Can use here another quad LFO. Let's take this one here just to modulate the frequency of the LFO. Right, just so we have some movement in this arpeggio. Right, but now I want this voice to come in and out slowly again with a longer attack and a longer release. So I will send the gate from the LFO instead of directly to the FM operator. We will use a clock divider first. Right, this will divide the gates. Let's say divided by 32. Right, so now we need sustain all the way up. Attack, let's say about 1.5 seconds. Release, let's say again about 3. So now it will come in and out. Again, we can send this through a delay. I will use Prince of Perception. A bit more feedback and mix. Right, and we can use Opalach. We can use the same LFO to modulate depending also here. This will be FM operator, and again lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of reverb. Listen to this lovely patch. Now it's time we can use the sample also as a source by itself. I will just take the level down. Also the FM operator is quite loud here. Right, connect the sample to the mixer. This will basically be noise, but not just noise. Let's call this sample. It will be noise with lots of reverb, which is always nice. Right, something like this. Again, FM operator is still a bit loud. There are many more things you can do to this patch, like adding more variation with filtering or timbre, or more variation with the distortion. Right, but basically the actual waves of the Baltic Sea and their movement is what's driving this patch with the help of an envelope follower and a slope detector. If you recreate this patch with your own field recordings, please share your results with us. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Cheers.